Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Below the Line, the show about how movies are made. My name is Andres Ramirez, and I am with my co-host Zach Houston Scott. How are you, man?
Hey, doing pretty good tonight. It's another fun day on Below the Line. Did I just say night or are we in day? I mean, we're both recording at night, so.
Well, who knows? I mean, shout out to people listening to us in Pakistan. So who knows? We might have listeners in both in a lot of time zones. So have good morning and good night to whenever you're listening to us, or good afternoon, or have a good lunch. Whatever. Uh, yeah, uh, yeah. You did say good night, by the way.
Yeah, I did. But to answer your question, I am doing well. So,
That's really good to hear. Man, I'm actually really excited about this episode because for the last 2 weeks we've been talking about the Oscars, and as great as that has been, I don't know if I sort of felt that we were creatively constrained because we couldn't nerd out as much as we wanted to, but now we can. How are you feeling about not talking about the Oscars for a change?
relieved that awards season is over and we can move on to current industry topics or just stuff we want to discuss. So, very, very happy indeed.
Absolutely. Before we start, I wanted to remind the audience, please follow us on Spotify, share it with your friends, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Literally every view, every stream helps us grow and helps us reach more audience. So please hit that subscribe button. And do you have anything to add, my friend, before we start?
No, just any listen is great. Taking time out of your day just to hear us shoot the topics and just talk casually, keep on coming. And constructive feedback is always welcome. We're always looking to improve and we're always looking to try new things.
Absolutely. So, man, I think we should do a house check. So, what have you been watching? Were you able to watch Mickey 17?
I did, yes.
Oh, so what are your thoughts?
If Robert Pattinson was trying to audition for live action or reimaging of Ren and Stimpy, mission accomplished. I think he nailed his audition.
So, did you like it or did you not?
I mean, that was the most standout element of the movie, but I mean, to take it with how it is on its own, I think it's very timely, very much a product that I don't know if you've been following it or not, but it was delayed constantly
3 years. Yeah.
3 years, and it definitely shows because I don't know if the project was consistently rewritten. I don't know if behind the scenes there was a lot of just uncertainty. I don't know if they're follow up to Parasite or basically the thing that he was going to make after that movie was ever going to live up to the hype, but I'm sad to say it doesn't, but as its own thing, it's fine. And definitely, I think could have taken a little bit more advantage of its premise because it is interesting. You have someone who constantly is being reincarnated and working himself literally to death just as not necessarily a slave, but as someone who is just trying to colonize or help colonize a new
Well,
planet.
he's an expandable. I mean,
Expandable,
that's
exactly.
literally the character's description. Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Uh,
expendable, and that's all he's going to ever be and amount to. But no, the movie didn't really live up to that. It wasn't one of those like workers rise up stories. Definitely a lot of themes with its politics. I mean, you just look at those red hats and Mark
yeah.
Ruffalo's performance. I don't need to say any more than that. But no, I think again, speaking of that as its own thing, it was a fine movie. But if you're looking for the same kind of level of quality and the same level of layers that Parasite had, you're better off looking elsewhere because you're not going to find it here.
I agree to a certain degree. I was entertained by the film. I don't think it's boring, if that makes sense. Like, I think tonally it's all over the place, right? Like,
Mhm.
It is very quirky, but at the same time, that's Bong Joon Ho's style. In the
Yeah.
sense, like Parasite is a thriller, then it's a dark comedy, then it's like a drama at the end. So there's like a lot of tones within Parasite. So I didn't mind the multi-tone. Talking about Robert Pattinson, I think he should be in Pirates. He should be in Pirates because he gives a very Johnny Depp like performance in this film.
He
Uh,
was he was sounding a little to me like Tom Hardy does in the Venom movies, like the accent he put on. And I mean, a lot of it was either too serious to be as a comedy or satire, or too funny to be taken serious of itself, really.
I agree. The thing that I sort of was confused about the film is because I thought the first part was spectacular. No, I mean, not spectacular, but I was engaged in the concept, right? When he basically the film starts, and I guess the first half is like a flashback, essentially, of how he ended up being Mickey 17. I thought that first half was much more interesting than the second half when the Mark Ruffalo's character comes into fruition. Like he becomes much more important in the second half versus the first half, and the first half is much more sci-fi. And I thought the questions being presented were really interesting because I think essentially he was like a lab rat, but he was never explored that. And ultimately, I think the biggest betrayal of the film, I don't know if you would agree with me or not, is they really never answered the question thematically and the question that they used to advertise the movie, which is how does it feel to die? Because that is the big hook. You know, this guy can die, and in less than 24 hours, he comes back to life with the memories of how he died, right? But they really never answered that question, which I thought it was a betrayal because that sort of felt like it was a main theme. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I mean, the movie had presented a lot of ideas and a lot of characters being thrown that really ended up not going anywhere. And presenting itself, I think, could have helped if they either kept it singular or linear, or they just like added more detail or time to the movie, even though it's almost at 2.5 hours. But again, it's nice to see something that's kind of original. I know it's based on a novel, but take an original concept and put a lot of money into when we're so IP driven with adaptions and stuff like that nowadays. So, no, very happy that this exists, but whether or not it develops a following or whether or not it has a similar impact that Parasite does, I don't think it's going to, but I could be wrong.
Me neither. Do you think Bong Joon Ho should be back to making films in Korean or stay in English? Because I sort of think that there could have been a lot of directions lost in translation. And I wanted to ask you one last thing before we move on to the next topic, because I think we pretty much said our things about Mickey 17. You know the house where the guy that invented the the cloning process or whatever, was that the same house as Parasite, or was I the only one that caught that?
I
Like I
mean,
sort of thought he was connecting it.
maybe you were. Maybe you're right. The only thing I will say is that this is a guy who's directed also Snowpiercer. I think that movie's wonderful and it's very similarly aesthetic to that film. So I don't think he should stop making English films and I don't think he should just limit himself to Korean. I think let him kind of be more outside the box, but definitely scale back because I think working with a budget like this, definitely there's a lot
Oof.
more at stake.
What was the budget? It was 180, right?
180 million, and it's less likely it's going to recuperate it if the domestic box office from this weekend is any judge of that.
We'll talk about it. I will talk about two things you mentioned: box office and adaptations. We have some interesting discussions. But before we move on to that topic, I wanted to ask you, what other TV shows have you been watching? I know you watched Invincible. How was the season finale? would you recommend people to binge season 2 and season 3, because season 2 was kind of like a letdown in ratings, or how was that experience?
Definitely, I recommend people, if they kind of lost interest with Invincible, come back for season three, because it does really pick up the slack and get interesting again with where it is with its story. Yeah, in terms of TV shows, I think Severance is almost finished, which that's a show I really, really want to start binging properly, especially season two. And outside of that, it's just been watching. You ever see Death of a Fan? Sorry, yeah, Death at a Funeral.
No, what is that?
So it's interesting because I was talking to my fiance about it. There's two versions of it, a 2007 and 2010 one. A 2007 was directed by Frank Oz and starred like Mr. Paradox from Deadpool and Wolverine and the guy from Succession. That's another show I'd like to start watching. Peter Dinklage, Alan Tudnik, about a
Whoa.
patriarch of a family who dies, and they basically everything that could go wrong at a funeral does. Was remade 3 years later, pretty much almost similarly as an Americanized story with an all African, mostly African American cast like Chris Rock and Martin Lawrence. So definitely that was kind of cool to see people's different interpretation of literally the same script beat for beat.
Where is it streaming?
You can get it on Amazon Prime.
Okay. Okay. That sounds wonderful. I might have to go check out Invincible. I also heard good things about Severance, but I have not seen it myself. I'll tell you what I've been seeing. In Max, which I guess it's different in Canada, I've been watching The Pit. It's a show. I bet the pitch was something along these lines. It's a show like 24, where each episode is an hour of a particular event. In this case, it's about a group of doctors working in ER and the chaos of that nature post pandemic. So far, it's been very interesting. And as somebody that has been a couple of times to the ER, quite realistic. And it's really well acted. And I mean, you can see the difficulty. I think it's really good at exposing or showcasing how difficult it is to be an ER doctor in a big city like Vancouver, New York, Pittsburgh. In the case of the show, it takes place in Pittsburgh, and they deal a lot with fentanyl, drug overdose. So I think it really shines a reality of the crisis that these doctors face. And on top of that, is very, very entertaining. Like each episode leaves you with a cliffhanger. And I think that's good.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'll have to check that out.
I don't know, what is the Max or HBO Max equivalent platform in Canada, just in case somebody is listening to us in Canada? What is that one?
We have Crave. That's the one that we consider max up here.
So you heard it, folks. You have to go to Crave. So now, Zach, shall we discuss a little bit of the box office? What is your thoughts on this last weekend?
It's another disappointing weekend, all things considered, mostly just because, I mean, with Mickey 17 underperforming, pretty much Captain America falling almost out of the top 10 box office. And I don't expect really things to pick up into the next week. Like all we have coming out this year, or not year, week
Month.
is Nova, the Jack Quaid film, and that new Looney Tunes film that's gotten limited coverage and marketing. So, I mean, definitely it's going to be a bit of another quiet one until Snow White comes out next week.
Yeah, and it's not distributed by Warner, right? That Looney Tunes movie that is not made by Warner, right?
Well, it was produced by them, but I mean, no, not distributed. It was picked up by Ketchup Entertainment, an independent studio that probably is known for releasing the last Hellboy movie, which, if you haven't heard of that one, well,
Oh,
that's okay. The Crooked
I
Man.
I think they also just distributed a Mexican film that I watched this past weekend here in Mexico.
Okay.
I sort of remember seeing that logo recently. Just to go over the box office a little bit, just so people understand how disappointing Mickey 17 was for Warner. It was $180 million. That's what it cost, right? And it only made 19 million dollars at the box office. That's counting the US and Canada. Just so people understand, Zach, would you mind explaining the audience how does that translate back to the studio? Like, usually, how much money do theaters keep? How much money goes back to the studio? Do you know that?
A portion of, since COVID, it has diminished quite a bit, especially the theatrical release window. So, I mean, really, the theaters can only take a certain amount of ticket sales, and the rest is related to their concessions. I don't have an estimate number, but I know it's a bit smaller in compared to where things were pre-COVID. And ideally, they need to earn at least double their money back, or at least 2.5 worldwide,
Not counting marketing, right?
not counting marketing. Correct. To break even, because most movies, I mean, you're basically taking a loss no matter what, but it's all about the merchandising, which unfortunately for a movie like Mickey 17, which is a very niche market, I could see maybe the book sales getting a bit of a uptick, but outside of that, no marketing whatsoever or merchandise to come from it.
And just to report on Captain America, it had a 43.5% drop, which is very bad for Disney. And it's still grossing $8 million, but it looks like it's going to underperform both domestically and globally, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
The one film that had a very good week was Anora with a 573.7%, making about almost $2 million. I guess that Oscar win and that re-release in theaters really helped it. So I guess I'm happy for Sean Baker. People went and see his film, and they had a very good weekend. So congrats to Anora. Do you have any other thoughts on the box office?
No, I think that's about it. Nora got that post Oscar box office bump, and good for it.
And just for my Mexican fans, the box office is completely different here. Even though Mickey 17 came out, it did not made a splash here in Mexico, actually. The number one box office here in Mexico is Captain America with 911,000, with a drop around 46%, so very close to its American counterpart. The second one is The Monkey with 300,000, with a minus 53.9 drop. And on third place, we had Mufasa still making a lot of money here with 85,000. So I guess good for Disney. They have a lot of films here in the top 10. So I just wanted to report that for our Mexican audience. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on the box office, my friends?
Not at all. I think it's going to be, again, a little quiet until Snow White picks it up in the next week or two.
We'll see about that because there's a, a whole world of controversy.
Yeah.
Um, so let's talk about a show. Were you able to watch Daredevil?
Fortunately, not. I do need to catch up with that, and it sucks I wasn't able to do it before the podcast, but I will
It's okay.
be able to get on
Um,
it soon.
I'll just give my brief thoughts. It continues up. However, I want to see him suit up. And that's all I'm going to say. Hopefully, next week we can discuss episode 3 and episode 4.
Perfect.
Just a quick note on Daredevil. Did you heard the news that it was not as watched?
I did. It actually was viewed less than the last MCU show, Agatha All Along.
Yeah, and it's crazy because outside of all the shows in Disney, The Acolyte, which by many fans of Star Wars is to be considered a show that kind of put Star Wars in a very awkward spot, had more views to start the show. So, what do you think about that? Like, is the MCU in a very bad state, or do you think that the strategy of how it's released is really affecting this? Because something to take note is that the show was a bingeable show and now it's not back in Netflix. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think first of all, why it did less than Agatha, because witches have a very strong fan base, or at the very least,
That's
the fans
true.
of them. I mean, you look at the Hex Girls, you look at Hocus Pocus, you look at all of those kind of witchy esque things they look forward to every year. So I think even non comic fans could really get into Agatha, especially with how it was marketed. And this is the audience is expected to follow up with a character that, yes, has been appearing in recent years in small cameo roles, but also is a follow up to a show that ended like 7 years ago. So, I mean, really, the expectation for them to follow up, get back up to speed, as well as a bit of a darker rating, like it's TVMA, is, not your typical Disney friendly or even Marvel show. But I mean, look at something like Deadpool and Wolverine, which did so well last year. But even Deadpool was more of a goofy character, and Wolverine have that established fan base, whereas someone like Daredevil is definitely for a more mature and darker audience. So I think even like to compare it to the Acolytes, I mean, that fell off so much. So, I mean, it's still early on. We're only like 3 episodes in. So maybe the viewership will increase, or maybe they won't.
I think it has the potential that once it's bingeable, it'll increase. Because episode three it was great, but the thing that once you see it that lacked was action. Like it is a core drama, and Charlie Cox is fantastic when he's in the court, but it's a superhero show. So I hope that the pace continues to build as the next episodes come on. But I won't say more because you have not seen it. Maybe some people in the audience have not seen it. So, do you want to introduce the topic that we're talking now next? It's something that you're very passionate. Do you want to?
Yeah, definitely. Just talking about adaptions, like how things are going right now in terms of network TV, film, video games, all that good stuff. I'm very excited to talk about this one.
So, do you want to start in network TV?
Where do we
Yes.
begin? Yes, yes. Where do we
Okay.
begin? I guess
So
go right ahead.
you go, you go. It's a funny one. We're just too excited, people.
Yeah, I guess we'll start with the king of adoptions, or the old network king of adoptions, the CW.
Chan chan.
Yeah, oh, just with their constant up and downs over the years, specifically with how they've handled their superhero properties, specifically from like the Arrowverse and Smallville, and how they kind of wrapped it all up with Superman and Lois late last year. Like, there's no plans to continue any more superheroes. Like, they're all under the DC Studios umbrella. James Gunn is going to run it all now. So, it is very fascinating, and honestly kind of an end of an era in a sense that, network TV doesn't have like the big superhero adaptation. Like even Marvel, they had like back in the day Agents of Shields, Cloak and Dagger, the Inhumans. Yeah, yeah.
Back in the day, it was considered to be the scraps of the MCU, believe it or not. Uh, so I wanted to ask you something. Were you a fan of the Arrowverse? I know that's a very beloved saga by Vancouverites because it provide a lot of work to Vancouver. But
It did.
were you a fan about it? Uh,
I mean, at its peak, I can't say I was keeping up to date with everything just because of how busy I was. I mean, you know that very well too. We were both in school and working, but also just at first I was very much into like Arrow and then the Flash and then a little bit of Supergirl. But then stuff like Legends of Tomorrow and Batwoman, and then I mean non-Arrowverse shows like Gotham Knights and Superman and Lois. I really didn't have time to watch as much as I used to, just because it all became overwhelming, and you'd have to follow this show in order to catch up with the other one, and no, it was just becoming a lot to handle.
Yeah, it was too big for them to handle, right? And the budgets went out of control, I think, to a certain point when they did the massive crossovers. It's like they had so many stars. However, I did wanted to touch on one show. I'm very fond of it. And I think it's actually funny that it got canceled allegedly because James Gunn didn't win competition. But Superman and Lois, it's a wonderful show. I would say that Superman is one of those characters that has a mythological sort of statue, or, he's been forever, right? Truth and
Yeah.
justice in the American way. And I don't think I've never seen the definitive Superman, right? Of course, we have Christopher Reeve, but he was way before our time, right?
In the
And
70s, yeah.
we had the 2004 adaptation, and I like the Snyder versions, but I was never really a fan of it, if that makes sense.
No,
But
it does. He's definitely had more success on TV. Like you look at the cartoon show from the 90s with the same team that did Batman the animated series. That to me is the definitive take of the character. You've had like the Super Friends, you've had Superman and Lois, like Smallville, like I think that one really defined the network for where it was going. Like people argue, oh, One Tree Hill or Dawson's Creek. I always say no. Or Buffy the Vampire Slayer. No, Buffy was Fox.
for me, or what's the one that Blake Lively was on it?
Oh,
Mean Girls.
no, not
No,
Mean
it's
Girls. Ah, jeez. That's gonna sorry. Not Gilmore Girls, I think.
one of the girls. But yeah, I think you're right in that in that regard. It's kind of poetic that the network sort of seems to have faded with Superman starting the network and Superman ending it. But what I was gonna say regarding Superman and Lois is, I think it's a very well written show, and I think the way they make Superman feel human, even though I'm not a dad, not even close to it, is that he doesn't know how to raise kids, and I just think that makes Superman feel very connected. And as somebody has read some comic books, because Superman is very hard to read, DC is very hard to read, I thought they did a brilliant job at adapting. And believe it or not, I don't know if you've seen the whole show, which I recommend. They did the Death of Superman better than Zack Snyder did with a quarter of the budget.
That
And
I
that
did
to
see.
me,
That I did
it's
see, and
incredible.
especially the way they handled Doomsday. Like I did spoil myself with that, and how they approached that character made me realize, oh wow, like why didn't they do this for the comics, and why didn't they do this? I mean, they kind of did this for Batman v Superman with another character, but the villain they used in its place made a lot more sense. So definitely, I would say that was handled very well.
And I think overall, besides being a CW show, it's one of the most underrated shows, superhero shows. So, people, if you have not given a chance, this is my plea: go check out Superman and Lois. Now streaming on Max and Crave, I believe. So, go check it out. If you don't like the first episode, then it's not for you. But if you're hooked, you're gonna like it.
Yeah, I agree.
So, shall we talk about the other side of the coin of the CW, which includes Riverdale, another show shot in Vancouver? Did you ever watch Riverdale, or was that a thing you knew, or what was the cultural impact that Riverdale had on you?
Uh, well, I was very excited to see Archie adapted. I did read the comics growing up, and I was very, very excited to see them do something with the property, take it a little more serious. And in season one, I was all on top of it, especially being in Vancouver and seeing the cast downtown or just chill around. That was great. By season two, I'll admit I was getting a little tired of it, and just with the cliches and just its episodic feel and just its writing wasn't up to par. I read somewhere it was supposed to be a feature the first season that got turned into a full, series, and it
That
does
makes
take
sense.
it really does, cuz then I'd check in from time to time after I kind of stopped watching it weekly, and yeah, I was right too. It was just getting too ridiculous, and they were covering aspects from the comics I didn't really think were necessary to bring into this more darker, serious take. And I mean, they tried to create its own universe with like the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which aired on Netflix, and Katie Keene, which didn't even last barely a season. So I mean, it's just, yeah, definitely kind of the last push for them to make something of a comic adaptation. And yeah, I think overall, as a fan, I can say at least I got one season worth of television that was worth watching, and the rest of it, while it has its fan base, I just didn't happen to care or not worry about it anymore.
Yeah, I think it is one of those shows. Admittedly, if you wanna guilt me, it's fine. I've watched the first four seasons, but I couldn't keep up with the plots after season five. It
Yeah.
was just too much. But I agree, the first season is the strongest, and it also seems where the cast was the most committed. I think by season five, they even joke about the bad writing publicly and within the script, so it was pretty meta. But yeah, I think it's a cool show. Have you seen All American from the CW?
No, I haven't seen All American.
That's another show that I think it's underrated. The first couple of seasons are good. I think they just revamped it in the sense that they changed the cast and it's a new player.
Hmm.
But it's, I guess, one of the best CW shows that has a cohesive storyline.
Nice. I'm not sure that's an adaptation though, but I mean, I'll have to take a look at it.
It's an adaptation in the sense that the player they based the story from, or the story, was actually a real player
Okay. I see.
that
So it's
lived
not a
in that part of
biography.
LA. But I think they took a lot of creative liberties adapting, and I think he just gets royalty because they more or less follow his life story, but it's not really his life story, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's interesting.
Uh, so, shall we talk about the show that I think last week made a splash on Twitter, but now it's gone from Twitter, right? Something that you wanted to talk about. So, do you want to introduce it to the audience?
Oh yeah, the Powerpuff trailer. That was definitely something that was worth exploring and seeing. I mean, let's just say I was an avid follower when I first announced it was in development. And let me tell you, I even read the leak script that came from it when the project got shelved. So seeing this as the culmination of what it could have been, just honestly, like, is the kind of bad that Gotham Knights wished it could become. Like, it is just such a misuse of the IP and how it was being handled. Like, you have no idea how ugh, just cheap looking it was. Like, it looked like it was made on $5. I don't even think it was finished, the trailer, and I don't even know what to say in terms of like the people involved. Like, if they just had to make something, it very much reminded me of Velma in the sense where, yeah,
Oh
this is
boy.
an adaptation of something that we don't care about. It's literally, we're just going to insult the original for the sake of, we don't care for it. We want to make something better. That's the attitude I got, and I really just I really don't want to talk about it anymore, man.
It's okay. I was just curious because, like, I just never got to see it. That's the truth. By the time you texted me, all the links were broken because Warner took it down.
Yeah, they were
Uh,
fast to act on that. I mean, I just had to when I first heard. I'm like, oh, I gotta check this out, and I kind of wish I didn't.
I saw like gifs of it on Twitter, but I don't think a gif does justice to it. But I remember the backlash back when they announced it in 2020, but then it just quieted down. So I figured the show kind of came out and nobody cared, but I guess it got shelved. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say another aspect of us that people might not know is that we are both gamers, right?
Hmm. Huge gamers.
So, very excited for the Switch 2. Come on, Nintendo. Please tell us when this thing is coming out. Like, it's been a year and a half and you haven't announced anything. So far, it's a CGI trailer. We want to see the real thing.
Absolutely.
But what were your thoughts on the Super Mario Brothers movie that came out? Was it 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years
Uh,
now. Well, I'll say this: it was the first movie I saw 6 times in theaters.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, different reason. Well, I think because it was 90 minutes, but also just because Mario is like my favorite gaming series of all time. Just it brings me a lot of joy and happiness, and just to see that pretty much on the screen and everything I love about it, all the references, the visual style, like the simple, easygoing story, I was like taken really like into everything it was, and I'm really excited for the sequel, which I know it's going to introduce more of the series lore and more of the stuff we love about it. So, yeah, bring it on is all I can really say.
So
That's how
you
much,
thought it was a good adaptation?
very much so. That's like the standard adaptation. I mean, if I was to judge it on a film alone, if you're not a fan, yeah, it's is what it is. It's a movie for kids and gamers, but I mean, honestly, it's simple enough that like Illumination, the company that produced it, knows how to market. They know what people like, and they've definitely have a hold on it. That's why we have so many Despicable Me movies.
Yeah, I mean, did you mind Chris Pratt as a voice?
Yeah, I didn't mind honestly. The one I had an issue with was Fred Armisian, I think, as the Cranky Kong. That was a very awkward performance that I really think they should have got someone else for, but that's just my end.
No, I agree. It's one of those things where I think the film was an Easter egg, but like, I'm so excited with what they can do. I mean, they hinted at Luigi's Mansion, and that's one of my favorite games in the saga. Uh, Very underrated game because it kind of came out as a test demo for the GameCube back in, was it 2005 ish,
2001,
uh,
man.
2001.
We're
Um,
old.
yes, we are, and that hint was really something. And Jack Black as Bowser, Peaches, Peaches, Peaches was fantastic. I think it justifies that it made $1 billion, and I'm glad that what's his name, Nintendo's CEO, uh, that he was
Shigeru
very involved.
Miyamoto, the creative.
Yeah, he was very involved in the movie.
Yeah,
So, so I was going to ask you, what other Nintendo IP would you be excited to see adapted to the big screen?
I think the most obvious one, which has already been confirmed, is Zelda.
But it's not animated.
Well, it's not animated, no, but a live action take. But I'd also like to see Metroid. I'd also like to see Star Fox and
Ooh,
Kirby. And I mean, we've seen Pokemon be adapted into like a live action movie. So, the,
kind of.
kind of, yeah. But the potential's limitless for this company. I think just, I mean, you look at Sonic the Hedgehog and how well it's translated into live action.
Oof. Yeah. Bad Adventure 2. They,
Yeah,
they just adapted that game and it made a lot of money.
it did, and it
And
was great. Ended up being
yeah,
Jim Carrey's highest grossing movie. So,
yeah. I was going to ask you, if it were up to you, which story from Zelda would you adapt? Breath
Twilight.
of the Wild?
Oh no, Twilight Princess easily.
Which system was that from? I don't remember.
That was GameCube and Wii.
Oh, you wouldn't adapt Ocarina of Time?
I mean, yeah, I wouldn't be opposed, but the story I wouldn't mind seeing is either like Twilight Princess or Wind Waker. Like those are the two I wouldn't kill to see. Like Breath of the Wild, I mean, we've kind of already got a feature story from that and Tears of the Kingdom. So really just expand
True.
on the older games a bit.
Tom Holland is playing Link, right?
No, he's not.
Well,
He's got a
oh,
nice
okay.
plate.
Thank God. Because I heard a rumor that he was playing him, but he doesn't look like Link.
Yeah, no, he doesn't. He doesn't.
So, talking about gaming movies, what do you think of the Minecraft movie?
So it's interesting. I didn't play a lot of Minecraft growing up. Like I
Me
know
neither.
it's one of the biggest games. The fan base though, like it was a game that was initially popular, kind of got ignored for a bit, like with the rise of Fortnite and Roblox. But then suddenly the decade when it came out 10 years ago came back like full force. So this is a long time coming for people who grew up with it. And I mean, as someone who never played it, it looks fine. Honestly, the designs didn't really bug me so much, and the fact they got the guy who directed Napoleon Dynamite and Nacho Libre to do this movie is a little confusing,
Fun.
but I mean, we'll go with it. A fun story though, or not a fun story, actually a really heartwarming story for those. There was a child in the States who was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer that kids can only get. And he was a big Minecraft fan that ended up, uh, his dying wish was to see the movie. I joined a Facebook group called Crew Stories that basically band together to get the attention of Mojang and Warner Brothers and Legendary to make that happen. And the cast
Whoa.
ended up zooming like Jack Black and Jason Momoa to basically talk with him and just kind of, see what he thought of the movie and enjoy himself for. He did pass away yesterday, so rest in peace to the little
May he
guy.
rest in peace.
Yeah, and no, I mean, my view on the movie is regardless if it's whatever, I think that's a really touching story that Minecraft has that creativity on people, and this movie reflects that with how, people really love this IP and they cherish it. It's like their childhood. So,
Hopefully that come across in the screen because I think they have a pretty hardcore lore, so I hope that's translated.
mhm.
But let's talk about another game adaptation coming soon, April. Based on a not so controversial game, The Last of Us Part 2, where a main character likes to go golfing, if you know what I mean. Yeah, it's one of those games that, the first season of The Last of Us was very successful because for the most part it adapted the main story, the game part one. And part one, it is one of my favorite video games of all time, and it is really, really good. Part one, as a gaming experience, is really good. But part two came out to a lot of hate because it got leaked, and there was a huge spoiler that got leaked that made fans angry because at the time the marketing was kind of tricking the audience into believing something else happened. But according to Neil Druckmann, the game developer, you were supposed to feel miserable while playing the game. When they remastered it for PS5 last year, I tried to play and I definitely felt that. So, Zach, how do you think the game can come back? Because I think they will have a hard time making Abby empathetic. So, how do you think they could make that happen?
No, I think they have more time. And much like the first season of The Last of Us, they can develop a lot of the backstory and also the motivations and make them more sympathetic. Last of Us 2 is a controversial game, but I do respect the risks it took. And I will say that unlike the first game, this did make me want to see a third game to conclude this story, if that makes sense, because of the way that game ended and how it
I
set
agree.
itself up. Like, I will say, and it's ironic because Neil Cuckman doesn't want to basically
Druckmann.
I, I
Druckmann.
I know his name's Druckmann. I'm just saying he's a cuck. I mean, that new Naughty Dog IP is just the absolute worst. I'm sorry for all those people. I'm sure you're working hard on it, but I have no desire to play it.
Yeah, I mean, he said that Last of Us Part 3 is seemingly cancelled, which is a shame. I just think adapting this game will be very hard. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
No, no, I think it'll do well. Honestly, there will be people who are shocked, probably in the same way that they were with Euphoria, when that
Makes
was
sense.
big. So yeah, but Moving on, I mean, there are other like adaptions like we haven't yet talked about that are coming up pretty soon or are currently like, for example, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power on Prime. I mean, that's a show that's just very controversial with the Tolkien fan base.
And the lore, yeah.
Yeah, and the lore, and to a lesser extent, people who like the Peter Jackson films. Yeah, I think Amazon just blew its budget and wasted too much trying to adapt something that didn't need to happen. I think it was just a matter of retaining rights to an IP. And I mean, if that's what they're doing with Lord of the Rings, just watch what they're going to do with James Bond pretty soon.
Well, the thing about that Lord of the Rings show is that they didn't even bought the rights to Lord of the Rings. That's still with Warner, and that is the reason they made War of the Rohirrim. That was a way to keep the rights. Amazon bought the rights to the appendices, and I think they made an adaptation where they didn't understand what Peter Jackson did. To quote a very important quote that I think everybody adapting should do is the following. This is a quote by Peter Jackson. We made a promise to ourselves at the beginning of the process that we weren't going to put any of our own politics, our own messages, our own themes into these movies. What we were trying to do was to analyze what was important to Tolkien and try to honor him in a way. We were trying to make these films for him, not ourselves. So I think this should be the standard of adapting, whether it's Harry Potter, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's Star Wars to a certain degree. I don't know. What do you think? Do you agree with me or disagree?
No, I agree. I think when you're adapting, you should put that all out the front door when you're entering because, I mean, there's an appeal to it. And lately, I mean, even the upcoming Harry Potter adaptation from Max is already kind of throwing that out the window and making
Allegedly, because
allegedly,
nothing is official.
yeah, I mean, just based on the casting alone, we're already getting radically different interpretation of some of the characters, which I'm open to, but I mean, my bigger issue is more why are we seeing the story again when we had it adapted flawlessly, in my opinion. I mean, grievances aside for some things and what wasn't like following properly, but I mean, we don't need to see like 8, 10. This will probably be like a 15-year series on
20.
HBO. No, 20. Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be 20 because, like, for example, if you compare it to something like House of the Dragon, each season takes them 2 years to produce. So basically, it's 8 books. Let's say they release it every 2 years.
You mean 7 bucks? Because I know that.
Well, 7 books, 7 books. Yeah, my bad, my bad. Um, it'll take them like 10 to 15 years to get these produced, and they want to release it next year, and they haven't started filming. Um, so yeah, I think the Snape casting thing, it changes the character significantly. So I think that's gonna be a challenge in adapting that.
Well,
But
even going against that too, you're casting John Lithgow as Dumbledore. Like it was stated, like only British people should play the characters. So having an American actor goes really against the whole.
J.K.
Yeah, what?
Rowling,
Regardless of our beliefs, right now it does go against everything, and the fact that this guy is practically almost 80, like very concerning. Like he's definitely the oldest actor to be playing Dumbledore. So I mean,
I
that's
mean, he might not make it to book 6, or
yeah.
he might make it, and that might be very method active on his part. If you get the reference, you get the reference. But yeah, I think when they betrayed that, they kind of had an open lane to cast Adam Driver as Snape because he kind of looks like Snape. So I don't know. Let's see how that thing evolves. But I sort of thought of a fun thing to wrap the fun way to wrap the episode. And we're both filmmakers. We're
Mhm.
creative. So I wanted to ask you, what would be your dream IP to see adapted? Like, let's say Netflix calls you and they're like, "Hey, Zach, we want you to make this adaptation." What would be your pitch?
Easily, I would pick Bone. I think Bone is the one adaptation I would love to see more than anything. For those who don't know, it's a comic series by Jeff, or graphic novel series by Jeff Smith, released from 1991 to 2004. It's very much similar to Lord of the Rings, but it's just so creative with its world building, very simple to follow, and it's just really a good story that would easily work itself either live action or animated, depending on the direction they want to take it. I know they've been trying for years to do either a film or a television adaptation to no avail, but that is the one adaptation I would kill myself for in order to work on or do than
Is
anything.
that Scholastic? It's a publisher, right?
Yeah, it's Scholastics.
What is the premise about?
It follows these characters who are bones. They're basically looking like they're white ghosts, kind of the style of the old comic series.
Mm.
I guess it's kind of like old Walt Disney esque style. And they're chased out of town and they're taken to this valley where things are kind of weird in the sense that there are locusts around, there's these rat creatures, the currency is different, and they discover a farm girl, her grandma, and this bar owner who are harboring dark secrets amongst one another from another part of the land, and it's just kind of the family connection to everything and just all about the destiny and the lore of it all. So very, very entertaining, very well written story that I'd love to see adapted someday.
What would be your style? Like, it sounds more like animation, but what style of animation would you choose if you were up to choosing that?
I guess I would do the typical 3D, like very realistic, similar to like Secret Level or even Detective Pikachu. Just something where
Oh,
these creatures are alive, but also live action because there are humans in it. So I
oh,
mean,
I didn't know that. That's why I was asking.
yeah.
So for me, are you done, or should I do
Oh,
my
do
thing?
yours, man. We only got a couple more minutes.
So for me, I would love to see a real Pokemon adaptation. I know we have Detective Pikachu, but that's like Deadpool in a Pikachu skin because that's literally it. But I would love to see Ash Ketchum. And here's my pitch. You can tell me what you think about it. We can start with a movie where we could adapt parts of Indigo League. That's the first season of the anime, but definitely show him in that first episode, I choose you, and him bonding with Pikachu. But I would do it in a way that is practical, right? Like where the small child can get on top of a Charizard, where he can really interact with it, and maybe build it up to Pokemon the first movie, and closing out with a trilogy with Pokemon 3, the movie, when Charizard kind of becomes him and they fight Entei. I would love to see a practical filmmaking way of creating these Pokemons and maybe making animatronics in the style of Jurassic Park, the OG, and really allow the kid to be immersed in the world of Pokemon rather than making it all CGI. As great as that CGI look was, I think it lacked the immersion from the actors. Like looking at tennis balls is not easy. So I would love to see that immersion. However, if I would have to adapt a game, I would adapt Pokemon Legends Arceus, one of the best games in the Nintendo Switch. So, what do you think, my friend? Do you like that, or what would you do different?
No, I agree. I think the world. I recognize Pokemon from the anime, like the Ash Ketchum, Misty, and Brock one with Team Rocket. So I think
Oof.
literally that's the adaptation we need because I think Pokemon at its height was definitely based on those characters from that show.
Gotta catch them all, my friend. Gotta catch them all. Pokemon. That's the song. That is what made Pokemon Pokemon, not Deadpool. So, yeah, that's what I would do. One last thing before you sign us off, because I know we're running out of time. I also think there's some things that should not be adapted again. Like Lord of the Rings, we already have perfect adaptations. Same thing as with The Godfather. We don't need to make a remake of The Godfather, right?
I mean, I haven't heard there's a remake of The Godfather. I hope there's not one.
Well, somebody in Hollywood is thinking about it, right? But I think there's certain IPs that are so good that should not be touched. Like we're not remaking Gone with the Wind, right? I
No.
don't think we should be remaking Lord of the Rings or The Godfather again. As popular as they are, let the movies exist for themselves. And maybe Disney should have thought about it before they made Snow White. Again, I wish them the best because I was looking at the cast and crew, and he's directed by Mark Webb. Mark Webb has done really good work.
Has
So,
he though? Has he? I
I
mean,
mean,
one good.
500 Days of Summer is really good. The Spider-Man movies has have its moments, and he did that movie with Chris Evans and the girl
Gifted.
from
Gifted. Yeah.
yeah. So he has good things, but I think he works more as an indie. Ironically, the conversation we were having about Sean Baker, indie versus studio work, I think he works as an indie. However, what gives me hope about Snow White is that he knows how to direct a musical sequence, like in a fairy tale manner. If you remember that sequence in 500 Days of Summer when Gordon Joseph Levitt's character sings, what's the song? But they even have animated characters in that sequence and Harrison Ford reference. So he knows how to direct musicals. So maybe the film blows our mind. So here's hoping for the best. And in a way that respects the legacy of Walt Disney's Snow White, because in many ways that built the studio.
Yeah. I'll just say though, it's more troubling that I'm more excited for the Lilo and Stitch film than I am the Snow White. That actually doesn't look too bad from Disney.
That we'll talk about it sometime soon because
Oh
yes, it looks like it's gonna be very nostalgic. The trailer was fantastic. If you guys have not seen it, stay tuned to our Instagram. We did share it there, so follow us. And without that in mind, we're turning the hour, Zach. So do you want to sign us off, or do you want to say something else?
I think we're good. Just yeah, give us a follow. We're below the line 2025 at Instagram. Follow myself. My handle's the Zach Houston. Andres, do you want to give your handle again? I promise I'll get it
J
right.
A JARO 2096. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, you have a good night, and I will talk to you soon.
And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Bye bye.
Bye bye.